I'm Ernest Glaser. Works all right now?
Good.
Good.
I know it's going to be good. Now you can go.
Now we can go. My name is Ernest Glaser. I was born in Berlin, Germany, and in 1924. My parents were born in Germany as well. My father came from Pomerania, my mother from Saxony, and my father was a self-employed businessman, and my mother was a homemaker. I went to a public school, a grammar school, from age 6 to age 10, and then went on from there to a Jewish school, because at that point, it was 1934, Hitler had been elected into the parliament, and things started to get ugly in Germany. My parents thought that even though I was accepted into a gymnasium, a regular gymnasium, they thought because there was a quota system, it would be a good idea for me to go into a high-quality Jewish school, so that I don't have to suffer from anti-Semitism, and turned out to be a very good decision. I attended Lessler Schule, which is a private school located in the suburbs of Berlin, in Grunewald, and I went to that school from 1934 to 1938, when my parents decided that we needed to leave the country, and so they took me out of school, and I never did graduate from high school. In 1939, we immigrated to Shanghai as really a last resort. There were the question is always being asked as to why did we go to Shanghai, the only answer I can give you is that it was not intended to be a permanent stay. The idea was to come to the United States, but to be in a safe haven in the interim until the quota system that existed in the United States allowed us to enter the country. So our expectation was to be in Shanghai anywhere from 6 months maybe to a year maximum. And we left Germany in July of '39, and we went on a luxury liner, first class, from leaving from Trieste, Italy, to Shanghai, and I had a good time on that ship, and as you can imagine.
I just wanted to ask you if you were with your entire family and extended family?
No, I was just with my family. My family being my father and mother. I was an only child.
Okay.
And we had relatives that had immigrated to Shanghai previously, 1938, I had a couple of cousins that had immigrated to Shanghai earlier. The stay in Shanghai was really in three parts. When we arrived, all we had really was $12 American between the three of us. And so that wasn't a hell of a lot of money. We were helped by the Joint Distribution Committee, who had helped us all the way through Italy, and actually the Jewish agency in Berlin had also been helpful, and I have some of that documentation actually. The arrival in Shanghai was just a culture shock, as you can imagine. What we didn't realize was that while Shanghai itself was a very modern city, the area where we could afford to live with no money was the area of Hongqiu, which was right close to the wharf area. It was had been bombed and had seen, I think, some fighting in the war between the Japanese and the Chinese. So much of the area was ruined, so aside from that which hadn't been destroyed was in very, very dilapidated condition. We were put into a room with a bare bulb and a bedstand, pink walls, no toilet, no running water, and you can imagine the culture shock from coming from a luxury liner to that. We had an uncle, my mother's brother, in New York, who then sent us some money. I think it was something like $200, and we had a relative, another uncle actually, my mother's brother, who lived in South Africa, and who sent us something like $100. So all of a sudden, my parents were flush with money, so to speak, and we moved to better quarters, still in that area. Then my parents were looking around for different kind of housing. I, in the meantime, with the help of the Jewish social agency, was sent to an art school, and with the idea of, here's a kid, you know, didn't want to have him on the street. I was 16 at the time, and so I was, I took, it was a very good school, and it was electrical, to become an electrician, which was kind of ironic, because once you know this job, what are you going to do with it? Because the Chinese work for nothing, or almost nothing.
What language did you speak at that time?
German.
German.
Not with the Chinese, of course. I had learned English in high school. My mother knew some English from her high school. My father never went to high school. So we spoke German at home. Then we moved. Now comes the second part of the job, our stay in Shanghai. We moved to what was called the French Concession, which was a different part of town, actually the best part of town. And my parents, with the money that they had been sent by the relatives, bought a lease on a house. It was a 30-year lease on a house that was just finished building. And the idea was we had, I think, 5 rooms in that house, and we rented out 4 of them, and that meant we lived rent-free and had a little bit of added income. The crazy part, or it's really incredible. My parents, my father, signing a lease he couldn't read because it was in Chinese for 30 years, strictly on the say-so of a real estate broker who was also a refugee. But he did take that chance, and it worked out fine. And we moved in there and lived in this place until we were forced to, now comes really the third part, we're forced to move back to the area where we had originally arrived, it's Hongqiu, which then had been converted to a ghetto by the Japanese, but that was after Pearl Harbor. I started as started work as a bill collector, really. I worked for a soda water factory, which was owned by a former German, and they were, their customers were, they were selling to private individuals rather than stores, and they had home delivery of soda water, which was a very big item because people couldn't drink the water out of the faucet, and also the foreigners who lived there were doing a lot of guzzling. My job was to go around and collect the outstanding bills and any bottles that they had that hadn't been sent back. And I did this for about 6 months or so, maybe a little longer, when I learned about a job that was open in a necktie factory that was run by a couple of Russians, Russian Jews, and I was kind of a flunky there, doing whatever needed to be done. And I did that for about a year or so, and was told about another necktie factory run by a immigrant from Germany who had established a very, very high quality necktie business. And there I learned how to do a necktie from, you know, to cut the material and to sew it and put it together. And I worked for them quite a while, until really 1942, I think.
Did you speak Chinese?
That was not Chinese, that was an immigrant.
Did you learn?
Do I learn Chinese? Unfortunately, only Coolie language. Enough to make myself understood, but not really to learn the language. There was never any real interest on the part of immigrants to learn Chinese because we thought that we'd be there for only a short period of time. So, which is really a shame. We should have learned it. And then I got a job as an apprentice in a Swiss import-export company, and I worked for them for until I left the country, until I left Shanghai, which was in 47.
Was that with your parents?
With my parents, right. And the conditions in Shanghai were really generally unbelievable. Sanitary conditions were appalling. Refugee doctors were very helpful. To give you just one example, people, of course, during the war had a very poor nutrition and developed diseases that were based on insufficient vitamins and so on. One of the things that doctors recommended we do was to get an empty bottle, fill it with water, put in a teaspoon of sugar and a cake of yeast, and ferment that and drink 1 glass of that every day. Every time you take out a glass, you refill the bottle and add another teaspoon of sugar. And the yeast was fermenting it and developing a lot of vitamin B. And so those were the home remedies that were developed relatively inexpensively because we were not in good shape. A lot of people were very ill. And on top of this, there was the insecurity of job conditions, and the war was on by that time, and we were being bombed. As a matter of fact, there's a small story that's kind of interesting as to why that ghetto was established in the first place. That came out, we didn't know anything about this, it came out at the Nuremberg trials that German Gestapo representatives told the Japanese that there were 18,000 Jews in Shanghai and that they would be willing to build gas chambers and operate them to get rid of those Jews. And the Japanese said, no, we're not interested in that. And then but the Japanese didn't know what to do with us until the Germans told them that, you know, the Jews all over the world stick together, and if you take those Jews and hold them in a ghetto around the wharf areas and so on, then the American Jews will see to it that that area won't be bombed. And of course they knew better, but it made sense to the Japanese for this reason, and that's the interesting part of the story. It goes back to the Russian-Japanese War of 1905, when the Japanese were trying to finance that war and issue bonds, and nobody wanted to handle them until they came to a Jewish banker in New York who did market the bonds for them. And after the war, of course they won the war, but after the war they came to this guy and said, tell us, why did you handle it but nobody else handled it? And his answer was, because of what the Russians did to my people in Russia. And they remembered that.
Oh my God.
Isn't that an interesting story? Yeah, so...
Shoot, I'm sorry, Bob. I put the phone.
What?
The war years were pretty traumatic, as you can imagine. I was fortunate that I had a job and I was working, and with the war over,
You have been, what, 17 at what?
I was about almost 16 when we came there, and I was, what was it? In 1947, I was 23 when we left. To go into too many details would really take too much time. And then in 1947, we finally managed to come to the United States and came to San Francisco and lived in the Fillmore in San Francisco and rented a room there from a Russian couple.
You were still with your parents?
I was still with my parents, right. Then I heard from a friend that there were dances at the Jewish Community Center on Saturday night. So I went to one of them with him, with my friend, and ran into a schoolmate of mine who had married by then, and who had immigrated directly to the United States. And when the question came up as to what I was doing, I said, I just got here, I'm looking for a job, and I told them what I had been doing in Shanghai. They said, you did neckties? And I said, yeah. You're a cutter. I said, no, I'm not a cutter. Well, it turns out that my schoolmate's sister-in-law was working for a clothing manufacturer in Apparel City in San Francisco, and they were looking for cutters. And next thing I knew, I was a cutter, which was a good job. Very boring because very repetitive job, but it was a good, well-paid job, union job, and I got to know the union president and the union business manager, and who were involved in San Francisco politics, and I learned about San Francisco politics. But anyhow, we applied for American citizenship, and next thing was that I got a letter or a postcard from the government telling me to show up for selective service in the military. Well, I had spent enough time in Shanghai, I thought that I, if at all possible, would like to stay out of the military. And even though I was found to be 1A, you know, the classification based on the medical exam they gave me, the only way to stay out was to be a student. And I went first to City College, and then I studied at the University of California at Davis, and then went on to Stanford Business School, and that's my background.
So you did not go into service?
What's that?
You did not go into service?
I did not go into service, no.
How long were you a cutter? How long did that job last?
Probably 8 months.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, not much more. There was an interim job. I worked for a company called Hoyt, Shepston and Chiaroni in San Francisco. That was a very old line custom brokerage company. I got that job because a friend of mine had been, that I knew from Shanghai, knew of my background, and I had done some custom brokering in Shanghai for the company I worked for after the war. And I worked for them for about another 6 months or so, because I had to quit that job when I started going to college. So what else do you want to know?
Okay, when you got married, how you met your wife?
She was a blind date.
Did it happen that night you were to that dance?
No, this was in Chicago.
Oh.
After I graduated from Stanford, I went to Chicago with the Continental Can Company as a management trainee, and a fellow that I was working with introduced himself when he heard that there was another Jewish fellow from Germany. He was an engineer, a chemical engineer, and invited me to his home for the high holidays. And there was somebody else that he invited, who was a man much older than I was, whose wife was visiting her own family, so they invited him because he was all by himself for the holiday. And as we were talking, he said, you know, what I was doing, and they found out I was single. And, you know, married Jews don't like to see single men. Have I got a girl for you? And he gave me the telephone number of my wife, and I called her up, and we met, and have been together ever since. Actually, that's not true. We haven't been together ever since. We had a small falling out in the very beginning, before we were married, and she wouldn't talk to me for about 6 months. And then when I moved to the south side, I called her up again and invited her to see my new apartment. And she, by that time, decided, said maybe she missed something, and she came over. And it worked out very well. And we have 2 boys and 3 grandchildren.
That's wonderful. Where do they live?
One lives in Marin in Mill Valley, and one lives in San Mateo.
Oh, good. So you see them often?
Yes, they're trying to anyway.
Can we back up a little bit? In 1938.
Yeah.
That's in Berlin. That's when the bad things happened.
Oh, I didn't talk about that.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Actually, it goes, there's a little bit, quite a bit more to it. My father was in the business of wholesaling agricultural supplies, mostly twine and belting and that kind of thing. And there were practically no Jews in that business.
Was your mother working at that time?
No. And so everybody knew everybody in that business. And when Hitler came in, and it became difficult for my father to travel, one of his competitors, whom he had known for years, said that maybe the two should get together, and my father would handle the inside business, and he would do the travel for the company. And on a handshake, they said okay, and it was because of that man that we were tipped off on Crystal Night. He called up my dad at about 4 o'clock in the morning. He was an officer from the First World War and had joined the party for business reasons in about 1932, 33, somewhere around there. And so he must have known quite a bit. And he told my dad to get out of the house. And we lived with my grandmother, who was in the process of leaving the country to go to South Africa with her son. And we lived underground for about 3 weeks. And during that time, my mother and I went back to the house to, not the house, the apartment, to check on mail and so on. And the concierge at the apartment house said that the Gestapo was asking for Mr. Glaser. And my mother said, well, what did you tell him? And he said, I told him that you may have gone to France and escaped. And that saved us because they didn't leave any arrest warrant or anything. And then about 3 weeks later, this man called my mom. No, actually, my father called him because he told my father to stay in touch. My father called him and he said, everything is okay now, right now, you don't have to worry, but I want to talk to you. Let's get together and have some coffee. And he told my father that he said, I thought I'd never tell you this, but I would suggest you get out of the country. And because of him, we left. Otherwise, we would have never left.
That was a close call.
Very close call. Wow. Because by the time we arrived in Shanghai, I think it was, the Germans marched into Poland. The war started. And there wasn't much more going on. Hello. So that's the story.
Well, that's pretty good.
Interruption here. See, Bob,
yes.
Have a little interruption.
Yes, I'll stop.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the man that your father...
I don't really know much about him, other than...
That he was not a Jewish man.
No, he was not Jewish. German. No, they didn't take Nazi... The Nazi party didn't take Jews. And not knowingly anyway.
And that was what he...
Actually, there were some in the Nazi party. There was one, I just read a book not too long ago, but I don't remember the details, who was a naval officer and a relatively high-ranking Nazi who was Jewish. And his brother was a spy for the Russians. And I forgot the detail. It was an interesting book, but it was a true story.
There's another book written, and I have not read it yet, but a friend gave it to me, and the whole book talks about the number of Jews that were in the German army.
Yeah.
A number of Jews. You spoke of one.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
That is so shocking.
No, it isn't, because that was the way to survive.
Yeah, but why did
what are they going to do?
Why did the Germans keep them, knowing that they were Jews?
Well, I'm not so sure they knew. I'm not too sure.
Would that have been not knowing that they were Jewish?
No, there are a number of reasons. But one is there was a lot of intermarriage, and there may have been half Jews. And so that played a role. One thing that was interesting about the man that my father knew, as I said, it was on a handshake, and but there's a lot more to it. He, about a year after they had the arrangement, he told my father, listen, I'm getting trouble with the party. They're telling me that, you know, you're working. They didn't know the arrangement they had. And so I really think we're better off if you stay home, and don't worry about it. I'll send you a check every month on the business. And he did to the last day, which is amazing.
Sure. Wow.
And he was really our savior. sort of a Schindler, Schindler of one.
Righteous Gentile.
What's that?
Yeah, righteous Gentiles.
Yeah,
saving
we were very fortunate. I don't remember his name. I don't
Did
remember,
you start
but he was
saying-
killed. My parents tried to contact him, and his widow said that he was killed during an air raid the last week of the war. Yeah. So what else do you want to know?
I think we're doing pretty good.
Okay.
Did you know Bill Bachner?
Bill?
Bachner?
No.
He was active in B'nai B'rith here.
No.
He was a German speaker.
I think we're done.
Can I go home now?
Oh,